When people ask me what I do, I say I'm a freelance interior designer. But the truth is, I've spent the last 12 years designing one house, mine. Our house. Except now I can barely say that without choking on the word. I married Michael when I was 26, bright-eyed, and still naive enough to believe that love once spoken and celebrated would naturally last. He was the kind of man who knew how to work a room charming in that easy Southern way. A real estate investor, with a smile that disarmed people and a confidence that bordered on theatrical. When we bought the house on Sycamore Lane, a quiet cul-de-sac just outside of Atlanta, I thought we were building a life. It had good bones, that house. Oak floors that creaked a little too much, but made the place feel like it breathed with us. The kitchen had hideous orange countertops when we moved in, but I saw potential just like I did in our marriage. I stripped, sanded, painted, refinished, and decorated. Every curtain, every light fixture, every drawer pull was a decision made with care. I didn't just decorate it, I inhabited it, made it warm, made it ours. Or so I thought. In those early years, I felt like we were partners. He'd handle the big picture stuff, mortgages, investments, growth, and I'd pour myself into creating something beautiful, something rooted. He used to come home from a long day, drop his keys on the entryway table I found at an estate sale, and kiss the top of my head. "No place like home," he'd say. And I believed he meant it. But over time, the way he said we became I, and the way he looked at me shifted from wonder to expectation. It was subtle at first. The way he'd laugh off my questions about the budget. "Don't worry your pretty head about all that." The way he started calling my business a little side hustle when talking to friends. The way he gradually took over the finances without ever saying he was. I let it happen because I loved him, and because I was taught that love required compromise. I let it happen because I told myself he was just stressed. That's what I repeated when he started disappearing into his office late at night, when his phone was suddenly locked with a passcode, when he began making investment calls I wasn't part of, muttering about new opportunities I didn't need to be involved in. He stopped asking me to come to the walkthroughs, stopped showing me properties. At first, I joked that he was trying to keep business and home separate. He smiled and said, "You're the heart. Let me be the head." And something in me winced, but I smiled anyway. Because I'd started confusing silence with strength. Because being the heart sounded noble, even if it meant being sidelined. I don't remember the exact moment the love tilted into hierarchy. It doesn't happen all at once. One day you're equals finishing each other's sentences. Then one morning you wake up and realize you're orbiting his life, not sharing it. You cook his favorite meals because it's easier than arguing. You nod along when he talks about risk and return, even though your gut twists every time he mentions refinancing. You pretend not to notice when he starts calling the house my property instead of our home. I told myself that keeping the peace was a form of love, that trusting him was what good wives do, that I didn't need to know every detail. And anyway, he paid the mortgage. He handled the taxes, the savings, the future. That was our unspoken arrangement. And I was okay with that, until the morning I found the letter in the mailbox. I hadn't even brushed my teeth yet. The sun was just beginning to warm the sidewalk, and I was still wearing Michael's old Tulane sweatshirt sleeves pushed up as I walked barefoot across the dewy lawn to grab the mail. It was mostly junk catalogs, credit card offers, and a coupon for gutter cleaning. But tucked between a Pottery Barn flyer and a dentist postcard was a stiff, official-looking envelope from the bank. My first thought was that it was a notice about interest rates, or maybe something about our escrow account. I opened it without thinking, the way you open anything that seems like routine paper. But what I pulled out made the world narrow around me like a tunnel. Notice of foreclosure proceedings. Final warning. I blinked, read it again. My name wasn't even on it. It was addressed to Michael Harrison. He had until the end of the month to resolve the matter. The property listed was our address. My house, my home. I sat down right there on the front steps, the cold concrete biting into my skin through the sweatshirt. I read the letter 4 times before I could even feel the panic rising in my throat. It had to be a mistake, a clerical error, some ridiculous misprint. I walked inside on autopilot and called the bank, fingers trembling as I dialed the number. A chipper voice answered, asking for verification. I gave them what they needed. The woman's tone changed when she pulled up the account. I remember every word she said. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't disclose details to you. You're not listed on the loan or the title." I laughed. Actually laughed. "What do you mean I've lived here for 12 years? We bought it together." Again. "I'm sorry, but your name isn't attached to the property." I didn't hear the rest. I couldn't. I stared at the living room across from me, the soft ivory walls I painted by hand, the gallery wall I hung with our anniversary photos, the little olive tree in the corner I nurtured from a clipping. This was my house, my home, my everything. And legally, it wasn't mine at all. That was the morning I stopped believing that silence was strength. That was the first fracture. And like all things built on a lie, once it started breaking, nothing could hold it together. I walked into the bank with a file folder clutched tight against my chest, the edge digging into my ribs with every step. The same bank we'd used since our first down payment. I remember the first time we sat in that office. Michael's hand on my knee, both of us wide-eyed, young, nervous, excited. I'd worn a navy blazer and heels that pinched because I wanted to look like someone who belonged in a room like that. Now I was wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater, and a hollowed-out expression I hadn't even noticed forming. The woman at the desk had the kind of polite warmth you get from someone trained to smile for a living. She introduced herself as Shelby, said it was no problem, she could pull up the account details. I handed her the folder without a word. Inside our marriage license, the original home deed, even a copy of our wedding photo tucked in for good measure. I don't know why I brought that last one. Maybe I thought it would remind them or me or him of what this was supposed to be. Shelby clicked away at her keyboard while I stared at the motivational poster behind her desk. Integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. I almost laughed. Then she paused, blinked at the screen, and tilted her head. She said, like something mildly inconvenient had popped up. "According to our records, your name was removed from the property in March." She said it like she was telling me my subscription had expired. Removed? Just like that? I shook my head. That's not possible. There must be some mistake. I handed her the old deed, my name printed on it. She took it, gently nodded, then clicked a few more times. "A quitclaim deed was filed on March 18th, she said, tapping the screen. "Signed by both Michael and... well, here." She turned the monitor. And there it was. My signature. Except it wasn't mine. It looked like it. Close enough. But I knew every curve of that name the way I loop the J in Julia, the small underline I draw without thinking. This one was too neat, too practiced. Almost like someone had studied it. Copied it. I stared at it so long the lines began to blur. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. Shelby was still talking, I think trying to explain the filing process, the county clerk's office, the notarization procedures. But her voice was far away, muffled, like I was hearing her through a wall of water. I couldn't move. Couldn't think. Had I signed something by mistake? Was there some refinancing form I'd missed? Had I nodded along to something Michael said, and scribbled where he pointed without reading? Shame coiled around my spine like a snake, tightening with every breath. Because I wasn't just stunned, I was doubting myself. Maybe I had done this. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I'd been so checked out, so trusting, so focused on keeping the peace that I handed over the keys to everything without realizing it. Shelby gently slid the folder back across the desk to me. "You can contact the county records office to file a dispute if you believe the document was forged," she said quietly. "I'm sorry, ma'am." I nodded once, not because I understood, but because I didn't want to start crying in that sterile little office under the fluorescent lights. I walked to my car in a daze, unlocked it, and sat behind the wheel without turning it on. The leather was hot beneath me. The air smelled like vanilla and dust. I held the file folder in my lap and stared at my name, written in someone else's hand. It wasn't just a forgery. It was an erasure. That night I made chicken piccata. I don't know why. Maybe because it's his favorite. Maybe because I needed something to hold on to. I set the table, poured wine, and lit the candles like I had 100 times before. When Michael walked through the door, briefcase in hand, he kissed the top of my head and said, "Smells amazing." I waited until we were halfway through the meal. He was telling me about some new real estate play, his tone. Casual, confident, full of numbers and phrases meant to sound important. I placed my fork down, smoothed my napkin, and said quietly, "I went to the bank today." He paused, just for a second, then smiled. "You should have told me, I could have helped." I looked at him. Looked. The way he leaned back in his chair, at ease, at the flicker behind his eyes. "They said I'm not on the deed anymore." He didn't flinch, didn't blink. "What?" "They showed me the quitclaim deed," I said. "It had my signature." His smile widened the way it does when he's trying to steer the conversation. "Jules, you've been under so much stress lately. Are you sure you didn't sign something during the refi last fall?" "We went through a ton of paperwork then." I didn't respond, just watched him as he cut into his chicken like this was just another Tuesday. "You've been sleeping okay?" he asked, voice soft, concerned. "You've seemed a little off. Maybe talk to someone? A therapist." He reached across the table, brushed my hand. "I'm here if you need anything. We're a team, right?" Then he stood, kissed my forehead, and carried his wine glass upstairs like he hadn't just stolen the ground out from under me. I sat there long after he disappeared, watching the wax from the candle drip slowly down its stem. I didn't say another word. Not that night. Not for days. Because something in me had snapped, not in the way people think, not loud or chaotic, but with the quiet precision of a clock finally running out of time. That was the moment I stopped asking, stopped begging for clarity, stopped trying to make sense of a man who no longer made sense. That was the night I stopped talking and started watching. There's a kind of silence that doesn't scream. It listens. That's the kind I slipped into after that night. Not passive, not broken, just watchful. I stopped asking questions and started collecting answers. While Michael walked around the house with the calm swagger of someone who thought he'd gotten away with something, I became someone else, quiet, patient, surgical. I created a private folder on my laptop named June Plans, innocuous enough to avoid suspicion, and inside it, I began to build my case. Every unexplained bank withdrawal, every late-night charge on the joint credit card, every vague business invoice filed under shell companies I'd never heard of, I captured it all. I screen-recorded the bank app when I noticed funds moving at odd hours. I took photos of unopened mail addressed only to him from unfamiliar P.O. boxes. I ordered copies of the county property records and printed them 3 copies. One for the folder, one for a safe deposit box I opened in my name alone, and one I mailed to a friend's office I knew he'd never think to look at. I hired Linda after 3 weeks. Her website was simple, plain even, but something in her eyes told me she didn't play games. She was in her late 50s, silver haircut, sharp, no makeup, just clear eyes and steady hands. Her office smelled like old paper and lemonwood polish. She didn't flinch when I told her about the forged quitclaim. She just nodded, took a sip of black coffee and said, "He made one mistake already, the forgery. Now we wait for him to make another." Her voice was weighted, someone who'd been through hell and didn't need to scream to be taken seriously. I asked her not to call or email, just texts, and only from the burner phone I'd picked up the day I opened the safe deposit box. I told no one. Not even my sister, though. The urge to call her, to cry into the phone and ask what I should do, came often, usually around midnight when the house was dark, and Michael's muffled voice floated up from the downstairs office. I kept up the act, meals made, birthday cards, sent groceries bought. He never suspected. Why would he? I had spent years softening my edges so I wouldn't cut him when I asked for things. Now I was sharpening them again, piece by piece. I started backing up everything. All my emails went to a new cloud archive I paid for in cash. I found 5 old documents with my real signature, notarized college transcripts, our marriage license, even a lease agreement from our first apartment. Linda said to get more. So I did. I went to the UPS store and paid for notaries I didn't need. signed blank statements, wrote affirmations that I was me over and over again. My signature clear and traceable. Mine. I wasn't crazy. That was what I repeated to myself every time doubt tried to slither in through the cracks. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't emotional. I was methodical, strategic. A woman building her own shield, because no one else would. One night, while Michael was in Charleston for a property seminar, I pulled the original deed from the black accordion file in the upstairs closet. I laid it out on the dining room table, the one we bought together from an antique market, and refinished during our first spring in the house. My name was right there, printed in bold type. Julia Elaine Harrison, co-owner, co-borrower. For 10 years, that piece of paper sat quietly proof of a life we said we built together. I remembered how hard we worked to buy that house, how we skipped weekends out choosing instead to save for a down payment, how we painted the living room walls together that first summer. Him shirtless and sweaty, me covered in flecks of dusty blue paint, both of us laughing when we spilled primer all over the floor. I remembered that night he pulled me into the unfinished guest room and kissed me like the house itself was a promise. "We made this," he whispered against my ear. Back then, I believed him, believed us. And now he was treating it like a chess piece. Just one more asset to be moved, manipulated, hidden away. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I'd already spent those tears in the first 2 weeks. Now I was just clear. Clear like ice. I created a private timeline with dates, events, actions. Linda called it the timeline of pattern. Courts like patterns, she said. They liked stories with spine. So I gave them one. I included the day I noticed he changed his passcode, the day he stopped putting both our names on tax documents, the time he lost the renewal letter for our homeowner's insurance and insisted on switching providers without consulting me. All of it added up to a story, and I was going to tell it with precision. I spent those quiet months collecting, organizing, and strengthening. I journaled something I hadn't done since college. But now, every entry ended with one phrase: I know who I am. Because when someone spends years slowly making you question that your instincts, your memory, your worth, you have to rebuild from the inside out. I cooked dinner most nights, said at the right times when he spoke, laughed politely when he made bad jokes. I smiled when he mentioned how well his investments were going. And every time he left the room, I documented. I didn't feel powerful. Not yet. I felt steady. Which in a strange way was better. Power comes in waves, but steadiness. That's where survival lives. That's where women like me stop breaking and start becoming. The first time I heard her name, I was standing in line at a coffee shop 2 towns over, waiting on my Americano, when a friend from my old design co-op tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I didn't know you and Michael were flipping again. Thought you guys were laying low." I turned slowly, masking the flood behind my ribs, and offered a careful smile. "We're not," I said evenly. Her brow furrowed. "That's weird. He's been renovating that place on High Grove with some young thing. Tall, maybe early 30s. Wears those big gold hoops and always posts photos like she's on HGTV." I swallowed the bile and thanked her. That night, after walking the dog and double-checking the locks like I always did now, I opened my laptop, pulled up the county's public property database, and typed in the address I knew too well, the house I'd once driven by with Michael, when he casually pointed and said, "Too much work for now, but maybe someday." Turns out, someday came without me. The ownership record listed the house under Elmont Holdings LLC. I clicked through the filing documents, and there it was, plain as daylight, registered agent Ariana Bell. The name meant nothing to me until I saw the signature at the bottom, the looping pink cursive. And then I remembered. I'd seen it before, months ago, scribbled inside a birthday card Michael had tossed on the counter, addressed to him from everyone at the office. One of those generic cards full of meaningless well wishes. Except hers had a smiley face next to it. A little heart dotting the I. I had thought nothing of it then. Now I knew better. I closed the tab, opened Instagram, and searched her name. The profile was public. Of course it was. Every photo is polished, filtered, filled with the curated messiness of someone who wants to seem authentic while selling a performance. There she was standing in what used to be my kitchen. The blue subway tile backsplash. I had agonized over the antique brass fixtures I imported from a shop in Savannah, posing like she owned it. Caption: Our next big flip. Hashtag from the ground up. Hashtag power couple projects. I didn't blink. Didn't exhale. Just stared. She stood with one hip popped to the side, a paint roller in one hand, and a Starbucks cup in the other. I saved the image to a private folder I'd named Receipts. No one would ever accuse me of jumping to conclusions again. I scrolled further, my hands steady, my stomach lined with ice. Another post, a mirror selfie of her and Michael at some hardware store holding up matching power drills. His and hers. The caption read, followed by a trail of fire emojis. The comments were nauseating. You two are goals. Look at this dream team. Finally someone who gets you. I screenshot everything. Every photo, every date stamp, every glowing comment that proved not only the relationship but the timeline. A timeline that would directly overlap with the date of the quitclaim deed. With the weekend he'd said he was attending his cousin's bachelor party. With the week he told me he was working late on a zoning appeal. It was all right there. She didn't even know she'd just become my star witness. I closed my laptop, stood up and walked to the kitchen, fed the dog, lit a candle. The citrus cedar scent curled into the air, clinging to the quiet like armor. My hands moved on autopilot, washing the coffee mug he left in the sink, turning off the porch light. He always forgot, smoothing the blanket on the couch, where we used to sit like strangers pretending to be partners. The house was quiet now. Not the kind of quiet that begs to be filled, but the kind that holds weight. Heavy, honest, final. I walked past the room where we kept the photos, the wedding album, and the framed beach print from our honeymoon. I didn't look inside. I didn't need to anymore. What I had wasn't suspicion. It was proof. Proof that he had given away the one place I poured myself into, layer by layer, wall by wall. Proof that he had stripped me of it on paper and then placed another woman in it like some twisted theatrical replacement. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just sat on the floor beside the dog, pressed my back against the cabinet doors, and let the quiet do what it does best, clarify. I thought about all the ways women are told to wait for certainty before they speak. All the times I'd been told I was overthinking, too sensitive, making it bigger than it was. Now I had certainty. It wore red lipstick and posted selfies in my kitchen. I didn't feel rage. Not then. I felt something colder, something clearer, a shift. The moment when the wind stops howling and starts moving with purpose. He thought I wouldn't find out. Thought I was too soft, too tired, too dependent. But what he didn't know, what she didn't know, was that I had already stopped needing his permission to take my life back. I stood, blew out the candle, and locked the door behind me. Let them renovate. Let them play pretend. The real construction had just begun. And this time I wasn't building for two. I was rebuilding for one. The thing about betrayal is that it rarely announces itself with fanfare. It slips in through the back door, smiling sweetly, carrying dessert. That's exactly how it happened the night Michael handed me the envelope just after dinner, after we'd cleared our plates, and I was reaching for the wine. He was unusually upbeat, tossing around words like simplify and consolidate, talking about how people our age should be smart with assets, how the market was volatile, and how we needed to protect what we had. I listened, tilting my head slightly, letting him believe I was half listening, the way I always used to when he monologued about his financial wisdom. You ever think about starting fresh? He asked, eyes on his glass, as he swirled the last bit of red wine. Like maybe a smaller place, more manageable. Maybe something modern. A condo even. Just for fun. The words hung between us, ridiculous and deliberate, like he was auditioning for a role he'd already rehearsed. I didn't blink. Fresh sounds nice, I murmured. He reached to his left and slid a manila envelope across the table, setting it down with the casualness of someone offering you the check after dinner. It's just a financial release, he said, as if that explained everything. Just stuff to get in order in case we want to move things around. I already had it looked over. I held the envelope in my hand, letting it rest on my palm like it weighed nothing. But my chest was heavy. He leaned back, smiling that same confident smirk I used to mistake for charm. I excused myself to make tea. My hands were steady, my voice smooth. Want anything? He shook his head, already scrolling through his phone. In the kitchen, I opened the envelope slowly, deliberately. The document was crisp, fresh ink notarized. At the top, quitclaim deed, transferring full ownership of the Sycamore Lane property from me, Julia Elaine Harrison, to Elmont Holdings, LLC, the same shell company I had already traced to her, Ariana Bell. Her name wasn't on the deed, but she was everywhere in it. Her fingerprints on the business name, her Instagram captions, her face in my kitchen. This was his next move. The final one, he thought. The transfer that would make her the legal queen of the castle he stole from me. I pulled out my phone, careful not to cast any shadows into the hallway. One photo per page, every signature, every seal, the notary's stamp, the date. The field where he'd left the signature line for me already highlighted in pale yellow, as if I were a child who needed help knowing where to write my name. The audacity of it nearly made me laugh. I placed the pages back in the envelope, resealed it gently, and returned to the table with his tea anyway, just to keep the performance going. He didn't even look up. "We can go over it tomorrow if you want," he said, distracted. "No rush." I nodded and tucked the envelope under a magazine in the entryway drawer. We said goodnight, like any other night. The next morning, while he was still snoring, I slipped out of bed and dressed quietly. I drove across town to Linda's office, where the sun was barely lifting off the horizon, and the streets were still damp from the overnight rain. Her assistant let me in before office hours. Linda was already there sipping her coffee, gray hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, glasses perched on the tip of her nose as she reviewed a thick stack of paperwork. She looked up when I walked in and saw the expression on my face. I handed her my phone without a word. She scrolled through the photos, nodding once, then twice. When she reached the signature block, she looked up and said, "This is enough." My breath caught, not from surprise, but from confirmation. "He's been planning this for months," I said, trying to move the house under her name without leaving a trace of me behind. But this time he didn't forge my signature, he waited for me to give it willingly. Linda leaned back in her chair, eyes sharp and calculating. "That makes it more dangerous," she said, "because it means he's gotten sloppy, arrogant. He thinks you're still asleep, which gives us leverage." She stood, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out a thick folder already labeled with my name. "I'll file for emergency injunction this week, and will request a full audit of every transfer tied to Elmont Holdings. But this deed, this right here, this is his sword and now it's ours." I felt something shift in me. Not relief, not victory. Something colder, something steadier. The satisfaction of knowing I hadn't lost my mind, that I wasn't paranoid or emotional or overreacting. I was just right, and now I had the proof to prove it. When I left her office, the sky had fully opened into daylight. I sat in my car for a moment, breathing in the stillness, letting it fill the space that had once been occupied by fear. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I turned the key in the ignition and drove home with the calm of someone holding the final move in a game the other player didn't know was already lost. The day arrived under an overcast sky, as if the universe knew exactly what was about to unfold. I stood outside the courthouse for a long moment, my hands resting lightly on the folder that held my truth, not just evidence, but the remnants of my dignity, my history, my home. The man I had trusted for 12 years sat inside, likely laughing beside his new flame, believing he had already won. But he hadn't read the last chapter. I had. I walked through the courthouse doors in a soft blue dress, the kind that whispered elegance without begging for attention. Minimal makeup, clean hair tied back in a low knot. No jewelry except my wedding band, not for sentiment, but for the irony of it. I'd worn it the day I signed our original deed together, and I was still wearing it as I walked toward the courtroom where he would face what he had done. Michael was already seated at the defendant's table, legs crossed, relaxed, like he was waiting for a tea time. He saw me and smirked. His hand casually brushed the thigh of the woman beside him, her heels far too loud for this place. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. Her presence was its own kind of arrogance. His lawyer, a younger man in an ill-fitting suit, stood as the judge entered. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "we'd like to clarify that this was a private property transfer between two parties who had reached a verbal understanding during a period of informal separation." Linda, my attorney, graying sharp and seasoned like steel, rose calmly. "We contest the validity of that quitclaim deed," she said, her voice even almost bored. "We believe it was forged." That was the moment the judge looked up, the first flicker of interest crossing his face. He leaned forward slightly. "Proceed." Linda nodded to me. I stood up slowly, the folder steady in my hands. My heart wasn't racing. It had done enough of that in the months leading up to this moment. Now it just beat, with the quiet rhythm of resolve. "Your Honor," I said, my voice clear, "this is my original copy of the house deed from 2012, showing joint ownership. My name is printed here, notarized, signed, and filed. For 10 years that house belonged to both of us, until 2 months ago when it was transferred without my knowledge." I handed the judge the original deed, then pulled out the forged quitclaim, the one I'd discovered at the bank. "This is the document that supposedly removed my name. My signature appears here, but I never signed it. In fact, I was never even told it existed." Michael shifted in his seat, a flicker of something discomfort maybe crossing his face. The woman next to him folded her arms. "Your Honor," I continued, "this is a certified copy of my driver's license, and here's a stack of notarized documents signed by me over the last 5 years, including contracts, tax forms, and license renewals. My handwriting is consistent. The signature on this quitclaim isn't just off, it's fabricated." Linda approached, with the next blow printed emails between Michael and his partner, lightly referencing my stubbornness and initial reluctance to move out his attempts to soften the process. Softened with theft, I suppose. I laid out screenshots from the woman's social media account. Her smiling in my kitchen captioned our next big flip. The same kitchen I had renovated with my own hands. The same window seat I had sewn curtains for while Michael binge-watched financial news. He had passed my life off as inventory. The judge leafed through the pages in silence. Then Linda reached for the final exhibit. "We also submit the findings of a licensed forensic handwriting expert," she said, placing the report down. "The analysis confirms with 98% certainty that the signature on the quitclaim deed does not belong to my client." There it was. The silence in the room became electric. Michael looked at his lawyer, who blinked rapidly, then stood up as if to protest, only to sit down again when the judge raised his hand. "I'd like a moment to review this," the judge said, eyes skimming over the expert's signature graphs. I watched his brows draw together, watched as he flipped back and forth between the documents, then glanced at me. "And you were never presented with this deed? Never asked to sign?" "Never," I answered. He gave me another one, weeks later. One he claimed was just a financial release. It was another quitclaim. I didn't sign that one either. Linda added, "And we have time-stamped photographs of that document taken before the defendant could reclaim it. More evidence that he was attempting a second fraudulent transfer." The judge turned to Michael. "Do you have a response?" Michael opened his mouth, but his lawyer spoke first. "We'd like time to review these materials, and I'm sure you would," the judge cut in, "but the evidence is substantial. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is forgery, and that is a felony." Michael's posture changed. He uncrossed his legs. He no longer looked smug. He looked pale. The woman beside him whispered something in his ear. He didn't answer. The judge looked back to me. "I'm ordering an immediate injunction on the property. No sale, no transfer, no occupancy changes until this case is resolved. Furthermore, based on the presented materials, I'm referring this to the district attorney for further review of potential criminal charges." My knees didn't buckle, my hands didn't shake. I simply nodded. Linda whispered, "We're on solid ground now." And I believed her. Because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about punishment. It was about reclaiming what was mine, not just the house, but the voice I had lost somewhere between dinner parties and whispered dismissals. As the gavel struck the block, I stood a little straighter. Outside, the rain had stopped. I walked past Michael without looking at him, my heels echoing on the polished marble. Just once I glanced back, not at him, but at the door closing behind him. He had thought the courtroom would be his clean escape, but instead, it became my clean beginning. The judgment came down on a gray Thursday morning, the kind where the air feels heavy with something inevitable, like the sky itself was holding its breath. I sat there in the courtroom, calm, steady, unmoved by the dramatics unraveling 2 chairs to my right. Michael's lawyer had spent the better part of the morning scrambling to find footing where there was none, spinning weak theories about intent and misunderstood consent, but the evidence was a blade, and we had sharpened it to the point of precision. When the judge spoke, the words were plain, almost underwhelming in their simplicity. This court finds that the quitclaim deed was filed under fraudulent conditions. The document is invalid. Ownership of the property at Sycamore Lane will revert to the original deed with joint ownership restored effective immediately. He paused, then added the line that felt like a stone dropping into still water. Given the evidence of intent to deceive Mr. Harrison is hereby fined for attempted fraud, and a formal inquiry into the financial activities surrounding Elmont Holdings LLC will be opened effective today. The courtroom didn't erupt. There were no gasps, no slammed fists, just the sound of a pen scratching across a legal pad. But across from me, I watched Michael go very still. His jaw twitched once, his hand resting on the armrest clenched and unclenched. The woman beside him, Ariana, leaned in, whispered something, and then suddenly stood. Her heels clicked 3 times against the marble floor before she gathered her purse and walked out, not even bothering to look back. I wondered what she had expected when she decided to help him steal a life that wasn't hers. Maybe she thought I'd disappear quietly. Maybe she didn't think at all. But now, under the fluorescent lights of that courtroom, she saw the truth for what it was, not filtered or staged or captioned, but raw and irrevocable. I didn't gloat, didn't flinch, just sat there as the rest of the formalities wrapped up around me. The judge's voice fading into background noise as legal language closed the loop on a chapter I had already started leaving behind. When it was over, Linda leaned in and said, "It's done." I nodded, stood, and walked out without glancing in Michael's direction. The echo of my heels against the floor filled the hallway, strong and unhurried. The same rhythm I'd once followed beside him, now moving entirely on my own. The air outside was cooler than I expected, a breeze cutting through the heat in a way that felt like mercy. A small crowd of reporters and court observers had gathered by the steps, some holding notepads, others with microphones ready, hoping for a soundbite, or a breakdown, or a story they could sensationalize for clicks. I didn't give them anything. Just walked straight through the chaos, eyes forward, spine aligned, like a woman who had just walked out of fire, still wearing silk. Someone called my name. Another asked how it felt to win. I didn't stop. My hand reached instinctively into my purse, pulled out my keys. The same keys I had carried for over a decade, their familiar weight grounding me as I approached my car. I unlocked the door with a quiet beep and slid into the driver's seat. The leather was warm. The faint scent of lavender from the sachet I kept in the center console filled the space like a sigh. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, not the woman he'd underestimated, not the one he thought too sentimental to notice, too quiet to fight. I saw someone else entirely. A woman who had been tested, burned, betrayed, and who had never stopped moving. My house was still mine. Not because of a courtroom, but because I never gave it away. Not truly, not in my soul. And no forged deed or fake signature or Instagram caption could change that. The walls of that house had heard me laugh, cry, rebuild. They had held me when he didn't. They had stayed loyal even when he didn't. And now, after everything, they were coming home with me. I didn't need to speak into cameras or dance on anyone's ruin. His empire had collapsed all on its own, the castle he tried to build, on lies and ego sinking into the sand where it belonged. I simply drove away, windows down, music low, the city stretching out before me not like a battlefield, but like a blank canvas. He would face the investigation. He would answer to the documents he signed the company. He hid behind the promises he made and broke. And I would return home. To the house with the blue tile backsplash and the hand-sewn curtains. To the porch with the chipped paint I always meant to fix. To the kitchen where the light hit the floor in golden stripes every morning. Not because he allowed it, but because he tried to take it and failed. The porch creaked beneath my bare feet as I stepped outside, a chipped coffee mug in one hand and a paintbrush in the other. The morning air smelled like pine and promise, and the soft mint paint shimmered faintly in the rising sun. I had found the old side table at a yard sale 2 weeks ago. Legs uneven, drawer swollen shut, but I saw something in it. Something worth restoring. Maybe because I finally understood what that meant. My rescue dog Clementine snored softly at my feet. She was a gentle mutt, with wiry fur and intelligent eyes, the kind of creature who had also been discarded once. We found each other at the shelter the week after the court ruling. I remember kneeling beside her cage, looking into those tired brown eyes and whispering, "We both deserve better." She hadn't looked away. The trees behind the house moved with the wind, not violently, just a hush like nature was finally letting me breathe again. The house was quiet too, but not empty. There was a difference. The silence no longer felt like a punishment. It felt like permission. After the judgment, I refinanced the house, my name only. That moment sitting across the desk from the loan officer felt surreal. I held the pen steady as I signed, palms warm with certainty. The same pen he once tried to use against me had now become mine again, not to erase, but to reclaim. Life after everything wasn't a grand transformation. It was 1,000 small ones. It was learning to cook for one and loving it. It was rearranging the living room not to impress anyone, but to suit where the light hit best at 3 p.m. It was painting furniture. It was sleeping in the middle of the bed. I started a virtual design course mostly late at night when the house felt too still. At first it was just a quiet side project, something to keep my mind focused on beauty and structure again. But word spread faster than I expected. The course filled up, then waitlisted. Women joined from all over, some fresh out of divorces, some recently widowed, others just rebuilding. We called the course Redesign from the Foundation. It wasn't just about furniture or color palettes. It was about the architecture of self, what happens when you strip your life down to the studs and have to decide intentionally what gets rebuilt. There were women like Teresa, who had left a marriage of 25 years after her husband drained their retirement. Women like Carla, who lost her partner to cancer and had no idea what to do with the space he'd left behind. They all came to learn design, but stayed for the stillness, the community, the reclamation. And maybe I needed them as much as they needed me. Sometimes I still think of Michael, not out of longing, not even out of rage, just as a shadow, like a rust stain on a white blouse. You know where it is even if no one else sees it. I remember the way he walked into that courtroom like a man arriving to collect a trophy. I remember his girlfriend's perfume in the hallway, loud and artificial. I remember his face when the judge read the ruling. But more than anything, I remember the look in his eyes when he realized I had known the whole time that I had been watching, that I had been ready. He underestimated silence. Underestimated the kind of woman who doesn't explode, just evolves. After everything he tried reaching out. Once. A vague email about talking things through and how things got complicated. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Sometimes the loudest power is no reply. The neighbors still wave when they walk past. Some know the story. Others only know me as the woman who grows lavender by the porch and repaints her mailbox every spring. And that's fine. Let them know peace, not pain. Inside the house, I've started keeping a memory drawer, not of him, but of me. Letters I've written to myself. A photo of me at 22, smiling in a thrift store dress before I met him. The copy of the original deed, my name bold and black, untouched. A reminder I was always here. As the sun shifted behind the clouds, I dipped the brush into the mint paint again. Smooth strokes, left to right, rhythm, breath. This table would be beautiful when it was done. Imperfect, sure. Some scars too deep to sand down. But still beautiful. Just like me. Clementine stirred at my feet and stretched yawning wide before curling back into herself. A gust of wind danced through the porch screen carrying the scent of rain and magnolia. I closed my eyes for a second, letting it all rush over me, not just the present, but the entire arc of it. The girl who used to whisper, "I'm fine," while breaking. The woman who stared down forged signatures and lies. The soul who stayed silent until it mattered. The voice he tried to erase. Final coat. I stood back and admired the table now glowing with soft resilience. It was more than furniture now. It was proof that we don't have to burn down everything to rebuild. Sometimes we just need to start with one corner, one color, one moment of saying, "This is mine." He tried to erase me with a pen, but I built my voice into stone.